don't our votes limit terms? And if the argument for term limits is premised on the desire to eliminate corruption, this isn't going to eliminate corruption. I mean, there's no guarantee that limiting time served is going to eliminate or at least even limit corruption. If anything, I think it moves it from one place over to another. Now, in Federalist 53, one of the things that James Madison had stated is that he thinks that frequent elections are the best way to limit terms as opposed to removing politicians from their seat by law, by having the law. But I think there's pros and cons to it, because I don't think that having term limits eliminates corruption. But because I also think that the people who are going to be engaging in corruption, they're just going to adapt and find new ways to do it. What you're doing is setting up that bureaucratic class. Don't we already complain that we have like lobbyists and bureaucrats that write our legislation? We're putting that on steroids. So that's one of the biggest hangups I have with this, is because I would love, if we're going to have term limits, can we first have term limits on how long private citizens can work for the federal government?
Yes, that's where the limit should be.
That's what I would love to see. A limitation on how long private citizens can work for the federal government. Because in having, and I can argue both sides of this. And it's not that I don't understand what people on the other side are saying. I've heard every argument and I don't disagree with you. But my concern is that you're simply making a group of people who are harder to hold accountable because they are unaccountable to the voters. You're making them more powerful. You might be removing the influence from the party to the voter. And that's one of the things that Hamilton explored. And I think it was Federalist 72. You might be removing some of the influence because the party has almost, you could argue, party has almost more influence than the people at this point. Now you might be switching that, but you're going to be replacing the party with the bureaucrats. Right. I mean, just how often have we had a conversation about deep state? How often have we had a conversation about how difficult it is to remove those people out of their positions? We're doing nothing about that, but we're going to be limiting our roles in this because we're limiting the people that we send. Now, I agree. You get some people out there like Nancy Pelosi that are in there forever. But here's the thing. People in San Francisco are sending her there. I don't think that the answer is to appeal to a government to limit your rights. I think the answer is to appeal to San Francisco voters to reconsider their votes. Because once you give the government that right, you ain't never getting it back. Now, I struggle with the dichotomy that choosing to empower government further, that the people who want limited government, they use government as an apparatus to limit government. It doesn't, because we're just going to create an expanded influence. We're swapping that. Because isn't the purpose to preserve the principle of consent by the governed? Now, how do we do that? By abdicating a portion of our duty. Now, here's the thing. Madison in Federalist 51, this was great because he was talking about government's purpose and the reason it was set up the way it was. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. He says, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. The great difficulty lies in you have to enable the government to control the governed, and then oblige it to control itself. And I love that because when he's talking about ambition to counter ambition, he's talking about power against power, the power of the states, federalism against the power of the federal government, the nation. And it's brilliant. That's why the United States is so singularly unique in that, because it is a competition of power and it's a struggle. And I feel like when we do the term limits, I agree with Madison, and he argued both sides of it. And I've seen him taken out of context, but I agree with that sentiment that that's what elections are.